So, hello everyone. Do you hear me? Is it working? My name is Iván Todorovich. I'm a developer at Camp to Camp. Today I want to talk about how to write tests to the Odoo frontend, or actually to test JavaScript code, not only the frontend. And so this is something we Odoo developers, at least I don't usually get to work on, because we usually work on Python modules. But still, it's very good to test your modules, and if they contain JavaScript code, you may want to do that. So we have two test suites in Odoo that allows us to test JavaScript code. So we have the QUnit test suite. This is an external project, by the way. It's used by Odoo. And you can use that to test a single component or a function in JavaScript in isolation. The test will run in isolation from the server as well. And so for that reason, all RPC calls have to be mocked. And then you have tours. Tours are basically like a list of steps that simulates user actions. And the idea is to test a business flow, like a whole sales process or things like that. And they do interact with the server. So a warning, though, to run these tests in your CI, Odoo will need to launch a headless browser to run them, so it's much more slower than running Python unit tests. So for this reason, try to write smarter tests. Also consider QUnit tests are a bit faster than the tours. This is because, well, they don't interact with the server and runs much faster, but still, it's much slower than Python. So when to use QUnit? Well, you can use it to test functions or to test UI components, like widgets, forms, and so on. For example, I have here a simple function that takes a name as an argument and returns a string, a greeting. So in order to test that, you would first need to create a file like this. You have to define a QUnit module. You set the name for your module. It can be the same name than your Odoo module, but it doesn't really have to be. It's just a string. And you can also have multiple QUnit modules per Odoo module. Optionally, you can set a before each parameter that allows you to pre-configure some data that's going to be present on every test. And then you define a function, and inside that function, you define the tests you want to run. In our case here, I'm just running the function 3 times and making some assertions on the results. So it's not enough to create that file. You also need to add it to the QUnit tests suite bundle. And you have to explicitly run it from your Python unit tests, because your Python unit tests are the entry point for the tests. To do so, now you take the QUnit module name you defined in the previous file, and you use it to pass it as a query string parameter to this controller, this web test controller. So these web test controllers will run the whole QUnit test suite, unless you pass the module name. So it's very important you do so, because if you forget, you will be running the whole test suite for every module you try to implement this. Then to test a widget, it's slightly more complicated, because you need to instantiate this widget. You have to mock the RPC calls if there are any, and so on. So there's a very useful function it's in the web test utils module. It's called createView. So this function takes a widget class, a view definition, and a mock RPC override that you can use to make some assertions on your widgets. For instance, here it's it's a widget I prepared for this PR. While I was working on this presentation, I realized there aren't that many examples in the OCA. So I took a module, it's web domain field. This module, what it does is it allows to use, for instance, in a view for a one-to-many field, you have the domain attribute that usually takes a domain definition. With this module, you can use another field, and the domain will come from the value of the other field. So I've written some tests. So I basically add the test to the QUnit test suite. Yeah, I forgot about this. Besides passing the mock RPC function, you also need to prepare some data for the create view method. And this data needs to follow some structure for that method. And the structure is basically an object where you have the model you want to mock, the fields of that model, and the records. It's just fantasy. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a real model with real fields. Then you call this function. You pass for instance, the form view class, because I'm trying to mock a form view. The architecture of the view, the definition of the view. And then on the mock RPC, you can just, well, make your assertions. I'm expecting a name search with the domain that's coming from the value of the other field. And that's pretty much how you use it. Sorry, lost my, where it is. Okay. I lost my presenter thingy. Just a second. All right. So, tips and tricks. Don't, when you're coding this, or when you're writing this test, don't run it from the command line. It's much better to do it in the browser, to launch them in the browser. So yeah, you can use the developer tools to debug and to analyze what's going on. And just consider some browser extensions might inject some code into the web page and might make them fail. So for that, I recommend to use incognito mode. And use the dev XML command line arguments so that you don't have to reinstall the module every time. I'm going to show you a little bit how that goes. So just going to run. This here. Here. So, where's my cursor here? So I have the model with the simple function I showed before, and the tests, and also, of course, the Python tests that are our entry point. Now, of course, you need to log in. Sorry. Now, when you get to this page, it's already filtering on the module I want to, because it's on the query parameters. And you can see that it passed. Now, just for the demonstration, let's make it fail. Like that. You refresh the page. And boom, now it fails. And you can use the developer tools to analyze what's going on and so on. It's much, much better to do this than running the Python test suite from the command line, and then you get this on the console, but you don't really know what's going on. All right. Actually, there. Yeah. So that's it for QUnit tests. Now, tours. When to use them? Well, you can use them in the point of sale, on the website, or even on the web client. but at least in my opinion, it's more useful for a point of sale. Normally, for any point of sale module, you want to test it with tours, and probably not unit tests. And this is because you want to test a whole workflow. And also, something that you can do with tours is, since they interact with the server, you can prepare some data on your database before launching them. And after they finish, you can also make some assertions on your database in Python. For the website, you can use them. Yeah, why not? The thing is, it's very common that website modules only do changes in QA views and not really include JavaScript code, unless they do. But if they don't, then it's better that you test these modules with just by parsing the server responses. And that's going to be faster than writing tours. And for the web client, you can definitely find some tours defined in Odoo source code. But it's not really common that we have to write them when we customize modules, when we customize widgets or create new widgets. For those, normally you want QUnit tests. They will be faster than tours. So I prepared some demo of a point of sale module. It's very simple. It just adds this custom button, and when you click on it, it gets this number input. But it will serve as an example to explain how we can code a tour for this. So tours, just a list of actions. We simulate a user workflow or a user interaction. We define these actions using jQuery selectors as triggers. So with this, you can target specific elements in the interface. And the way it's going to work is the tour runner will try to find for each step the element you have on the jQuery selector. It will wait a few seconds. I think it's something about 10 seconds, because sometimes the page is rendering and it takes a while for the element to be there. And once it finds it, it will continue to the next step. It will run an action when it finds it. By default, it's click. Unless it's an input, then it's just typing some text. But you can change the action with the run parameter for double click, drag drop. You have actions for any kind of user interaction. So, for instance, this is actually testing the model I showed before. First, we need to wait for the point of sale to finish loading. And to do so, we have to wait for the point of sale to not have an element called with a loader class. And then it's opening the session, and then it's clicking on the button, and so on. Now, there's a better way to write this. That was before it's old, but since I think 13, Odoo introduced these helpers, which are, well, for once it's more reliable, and also it's easier to maintain, because imagine between versions Odoo will change the interface and it will change the path. Your jQuery selectors will no longer work, and you will have to keep updating it, and you're just repeating code from module to module. So Odoo introduced these helpers that allow you to, in the end, build the list of steps by calling these methods, like the product screen, do, confirm, opening, pop-up. Bottom line is just creating this list of steps, but the definition of the step, now it's in the point of sale module. You can also create your steps. Here, I didn't show how to do it, but this click custom button is the one I defined in the model. So you can create your own steps so that it's easier to write your tours and maintain them. Once you have your tour, like with the QUnit tests, you need to add them to the assets test bundle. It's a different bundle, but you still need to add them to a bundle. And like with the QUnit tests, you still need to explicitly run them from Python test suites. And the difference, as I mentioned before, is that you can do some pre-configuration on your database before running them, and you can also make some assertions on the records after they have finished. Like imagine your module is creating some orders with some specific features, so you can make some assertions on those orders once they finish. So tips and tricks On Tours, well, use the helpers. Create your own if they don't exist. Use the browser developer tools to find the elements, the selectors. Before writing the tour, try to reproduce it yourself and start trying to find the selectors you need to click on the elements of the screen or to interact with the screen. And you can also use the built-in JavaScript console to test your selectors and to understand if they are working or not. And the last one, but not least, is use the screenshots or screencasts. I'm going to show you about this. It's pretty useful. So I have here the model I showed you before with the custom button and the test and so on. And let's run the test. Oh, yeah, sorry. But thanks. One more. Oh, it's difficult because I have to look there. And yes, 2. So this is going to run the test. It takes a while, much more time than the Python test suite. You see it's running the browser, getting some resources because the page is actually loading, and now they passed. But now imagine you had an error. I'm going to force this error with this simple flag. If you had an error, well, for once it's going to take longer because it's going to get stuck at one of the steps trying to find an element that's not there, but it will wait until a timeout of about, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds. It's just a few seconds, and that's when it's going to fail. And that's what's happening right now. And now it failed. But you don't really know what happened. And sometimes it's hard to understand what happened. Well, Odoo, by default, will save a screenshot of the very last moment when it failed in the temp directory. So I'm using Docker, so I have it mounted here. And that's what you find. So now you start to get an idea of what went wrong, at least. If that's not enough, you can use the screencasts. And then you define the directory where you want it. Again, the test is going to run. It's going to wait a few seconds until it fails. Trying to find the element, doesn't find it. Fails. This time, though, it's creating a video for us. That's going to show you exactly what the tour runner did until it got the error. And that will give you much more information and hopefully help you to fix your tests. So that's it. Thank you. There's the code for the presentation if you want it. Those are my details. If you want any, I will be available for any questions you may have, and I'm interested in this subject, so I can help you. Questions? Yeah.
If the tests don't fail, the videos recorded too?
No. No. Same with the screenshot. It's only when it fails. Sorry?
The video can be used for documentation.
I guess that's coming from what we discussed before, but no. You get the video only if it fails. If it doesn't fail, then no. Yes, it is. Yes. Anyone else? All right then. That's it. Thank you.